In silence, an anxiety grows inside millions of men. We don't talk about it over breakfast or post about it on social media, but it's there. The anguish of running without knowing where, of accumulating without understanding why. Time passes, the bills arrive, the body gets tired, and even after meeting all the targets imposed by society, the emptiness remains. Money has ceased to be a tool and has become an identity. We no longer work just to live. We work to prove that we are someone. The logic is brutal. Those who have are worth. Those who don't disappear. Deep down, everyone knows this. That's why so many submit to what they don't want, wear what they don't like, pretend what they don't feel. Survival has become a spectacle. Success, a heavy mask. Alan Watts saw all this clearly. He wasn't attacking money itself, but what we did with it. He showed that by trying to control life, we distance ourselves from it. That by turning everything into a goal, we lose the sense of now. And that by seeking security outside, we lose the freedom within. This video is an invitation to take an honest look at the price we are paying. Because the collapse of humanity may not come from wars or catastrophes, but from the silent sum of millions of people who have given up on themselves in the name of a system that doesn't see them. Throughout history, human beings have always needed symbols to make sense of existence. For centuries, these symbols were gods, myths, and rituals. But in the modern world, this place has been taken by a much more concrete entity: money. Not just as a means of exchange, but as a measure of human value. Capital has taken on the role of defining who deserves to be listened to, respected, and loved. Without realizing it, we have created a new religion: silent, omnipresent, unquestionable. This faith in accumulation spreads to all areas of life. From the choice of profession to the way we dress and interact, everything is mediated by economic criteria. A man who doesn't produce is seen as a burden. An unemployed father, a bankrupt professional, an artist with no financial return, all carry the stigma of uselessness in addition to real difficulties. Suffering ceases to be a human issue and becomes a moral problem. After all, in a society where anyone who doesn't make a profit is worthless, financial failure is treated as an existential failure. Alan Watts warned against turning tools into ends. Money, he said, should only serve life, not replace it. When we allow it to define our value, we reduce the human experience to numbers. We become economic functions, walking CVS, images designed to fit market expectations. That's when life begins to lose its zest. Even those who achieve financial success live under constant surveillance, the fear of falling, of losing status, of no longer being useful. Language reinforces this cult. We talk about winning in life as if it were a war. Doing well has become synonymous with accumulating. It doesn't matter if your soul is sick. What matters is looking prosperous. This inversion even affects love, which is now conditioned by stability. Relationships based on affection become viability agreements. Sensitivity gives way to performance and silence to self-promotion. Watts proposed a return to the essential. Not to deny material reality, but to remember that it does not define the totality of existence. A good life doesn't depend on your bank account, but on the coherence between what you live on the outside and what you feel on the inside. When money becomes the end, everything that doesn't generate profit loses value. Rest, affection, art, presence. The price of this is disconnection. While the logic of capital demands constant effort to appear successful, it also feeds a deep need for control. Everything needs to be planned, predicted, and guaranteed. In a culture that loves targets, productivity, and stability, unpredictability has become an enemy. But Alan Watts has always questioned this impulse. For him, absolute control of life is an illusion, and living trying to master it is the perfect recipe for the silent suffering that marks our time. The ego, according to Watts, is the internal structure that tries to maintain this illusory order. It defines itself by boundaries, labels, and images of success. And anything that escapes this image generates fear. The fear of loss, of failure, of aging, of oblivion. In response, we create control strategies. We accumulate money, seek prestige, organize rigid routines, all in the name of a security that is never complete. Something is always missing. There is always risk. And the more we try to control, the more anxious we feel. This logic affects the body and the mind. Anxiety, so present today in men who theoretically worked out, is a reflection of this rigidity. They live tense, hyper-alert lives, worried about maintaining what they have achieved or reaching the next level. The present is discarded in the name of an idealized future that never arrives. Life becomes a project that has to work, as if existence were a marketing campaign that can't fail. Watts saw this as a profound misunderstanding. For him, life is not an equation to be solved, but a dance to be lived. And dancing requires surrender. You have to trust the rhythm, accept the improvisations, welcome the missteps as part of the beauty. Suffering begins when we want to choreograph the uncontrollable, when we treat love as a contract, the body as a machine, time as currency. Everything is reduced to function, to performance, to results. This obsession with control is not limited to professional life. It invades our feelings. We learn to rationalize anger, to hide sadness, to dose enthusiasm. Even spirituality is controlled, as if it were possible to use meditation or prayer as tools for emotional productivity. Silence is no longer sought for silence's sake, but in order to be more productive the next day. This turns even inner peace into a product. Watts' proposal, then, is an invitation to trust. Not blind trust, but an active willingness to live with what there is. Accepting that we don't know everything, that we won't have all the answers, and that impermanence isn't a flaw. It's the very structure of reality. When we let go of control, space opens up for something new. Presence. This is the point that connects everything. Control, ego, and money are born out of the same fear. And only when this fear is embraced, no longer fed, do we begin to live truthfully. Next, we'll explore how this illusion directly affects the emotional health of millions, and the psychic price we pay for living for sale. The illusion of control, fueled by the obsession with success, has led us to turn life into a commodity. We no longer work just to survive, we work to sustain images. At every step, we sell parts of ourselves. We sell time, attention, energy, convictions. The world demands efficiency, but offers no room for doubt, pause, or fragility. So we become professionals in our own performance, living under the strain of looking good, even when everything is falling apart inside. This continuous pressure is not invisible. It shows up in the growing numbers of mental disorders among economically active adults. Burnout, anxiety, depression. Men who do everything right, but live with the feeling that something essential has been lost. It's not just overwork, but the impossibility of being vulnerable in an environment that only accepts strength and results. The problem isn't being tired. It's not being able to say you are. It's having to keep smiling while your body cries out for rest. Alan Watts already warned about the risks of living in a utilitarian way. When everything has to have a function, even the soul gets sick. Leisure becomes a strategy. Rest becomes productivity in disguise. Spirituality becomes a high-performance tool. Even silence is colonized by the obligation to be useful. In this way, the experience of life is being replaced by an efficient and yet deeply disconnected simulation. This logic is also being imposed on relationships. People no longer meet for presence, but for convenience. Affection is negotiated. The other becomes a mirror or a tool. In professional environments, there is no room for real listening, only for keeping up appearances. Even among friends, connection gives way to tiredness, and what should be a meeting becomes an exchange of favors or image maintenance. This deep disconnection generates a kind of loneliness that is difficult to describe. It's not the absence of people, but the absence of truth. Men who seem secure on the outside live with the feeling that if they stopped producing, they would disappear. Self-esteem depends on external recognition. Life begins to be measured by feedback, likes, and goals achieved. And when these signs of value become scarce, what remains is emptiness. Watts didn't propose escape, but reintegration. He reminded us that life is not about accumulating experiences to show off, but about living with presence, rescuing the value of the simple, being whole in a conversation, feeling time pass without guilt. These gestures, which don't make a profit, are the ones that heal. And healing, in this context, means remembering that the value of being is not in the shop window, but in the essence. If selling yourself has become the new way of life, showing off has become a permanent requirement. It's not enough to achieve goals, you have to look happy while doing it. The aesthetics of wealth have replaced meaning with image. Cars, trips, sculpted bodies, high-performance speeches, and unshakable happiness are displayed as proof of success. On social media, this has become almost a commandment. Show that you've won. Show that you're better. Show that you're doing well, even when you're not. This need to appear prosperous is not limited to luxury. It contaminates routine. There's an invisible script for how to be a successful man. Work hard, talk little about your pain, never show insecurity. If possible, dress soberly, show emotional control, and be admired. But this character is expensive. It requires the continual renunciation of what is spontaneous. It requires laughter to be rehearsed, the body to obey the calendar, and the mind to never stop, not even at night. Alan Watts pointed out that the rigidity with which we try to sustain these images destroys sensitivity. The soul can't bear to live on pretenses indefinitely. The need to appear strong, productive, and balanced prevents us from getting in touch with what is alive and pulsating. In the name of social respect, we sacrifice the space where emotions can be expressed truthfully. We laugh when we're sad. We agree when we want to leave. We perform when we just need to feel. The cost of this is deep fatigue, a tiredness that has no name, that doesn't go away with rest, because it doesn't come from an excess of tasks, but from the absence of meaning. To live to sustain an image is to gradually empty yourself. It means silencing everything that doesn't fit into the character. And because this character demands constant excellence, it is never satisfied. It always wants more. More likes, more recognition, more praise, until the soul, exhausted, falls ill. This illness is not easily diagnosed. It hides behind phrases like, "I'm working on a lot of things. I'm just in a rush. I'll rest later." But time passes, and the race doesn't end. Many men go on like this for years, functional, productive, respected, but deeply disconnected from themselves. The sparkle in their eyes fades. After understanding how image, control, and money hijack us emotionally, an inevitable question arises. Is it possible to be in the world without getting lost in it? For Alan Watts, the answer lay not in running away, but in transforming the way we relate to chaos. He recognized that the modern world is noisy, demanding, and often hostile to the soul. But he insisted, freedom doesn't start outside, it starts inside. Living in chaos without belonging to it requires an internal decision. It means choosing not to follow the automatic flow of the culture of haste, excess, and appearance. It's not about abandoning everything, but making different choices. Learning to say no to what steals our energy, and yes to what makes us whole again. This starts in everyday life. Reducing stimuli, slowing down, allowing yourself not to know, not to produce, not to perform. This attitude is not easy. It challenges everything we've been taught. From an early age, we hear that a real man is one who can cope, who produces, who solves. But how many men have silently crumbled trying to uphold this image? Watts proposes a break with this logic. He reminds us that there is dignity in tiredness, that there is wisdom in stopping, and that the human being is not an efficiency project. It is a living and unique experience. By living with more presence, the perspective changes. Time ceases to be an enemy and becomes an ally. Silence, once uncomfortable, becomes necessary. The pause, once synonymous with laziness, reveals itself as a cure. This doesn't mean abandoning commitments, but being wholehearted in them. The difference lies in doing things out of choice, not fear. In acting coherently, not out of obligation. This freedom is not born of great external revolutions. It starts with simple gestures, not responding immediately to everything, turning off notifications for a few hours, really listening to someone without thinking about the next task. Small attitudes that, taken together, build a new kind of presence. Watts called this the wisdom of now, a state in which the mind doesn't run, the body doesn't pretend, and the heart doesn't need to protect itself. To be in chaos without belonging to it is also to trust. Trusting that we don't need to control everything in order to live well, that we can make mistakes without losing value, that we can change our minds without losing respect. This trust doesn't come from certainty, but from surrender. And that's what makes us truly human. The ability to live in the present even when everything around us requires us to be somewhere else. By recovering this inner center, we begin to move with a different quality. No longer to please, prove, or win, but to live truthfully. And when we live truthfully, even chaos changes color. It's still noisy, but it no longer swallows us up. We are still exposed to the world, but no longer dragged down by it. Behind the quest for control, accumulation, and recognition, there is a silent presence that is rarely faced: death. We live as if it doesn't exist, as if the future is guaranteed by contracts, insurance, and career plans. But Alan Watts reminds us that it is precisely the forgetfulness of death that feeds our obsession with stability. Deep down, we try to buy with money what no currency can guarantee: time, permanence, meaning. Death is frightening because it reveals the fragility of everything we have built. It shows that no position is eternal, that no body endures forever, that every material achievement is, in the end, temporary. But this is where Watts turns the key. For him, death is not the end. It is a liberation, a reminder that life only has value when understood as something that escapes control. And that the more we resist this truth, the more we suffer trying to preserve what, by nature, is destined to pass. Accepting death as part of life reconnects us with the now. Anxiety decreases because we no longer have to predict everything. Fear loses strength because there is no longer the illusion of eternal security. And the value of things changes. A hug, a quiet cup of coffee, a sincere conversation. All these things take on real weight. We stop chasing symbols of power and start looking for authentic experiences. Not because we're weak, but because we finally understand what real strength is. Many men live imprisoned by goals that are not their own. They work for status, uphold standards, maintain images. But deep down, they feel that something essential is missing. Contact with finitude allows us to recover this essence. It allows us to ask questions that really matter. What sustains me when everything falls apart? What remains when the money runs out? What defines me when no one is looking? Watts said that you are only free when you stop trying to avoid the inevitable. And death is the inevitable reality that transforms all the others. When it is accepted, life changes. Decisions gain depth. Priorities are adjusted. And the courage to live authentically finally blossoms. Not out of boldness, but out of clarity. If you've come this far, it's because something inside you is also on the move. Something perhaps tired of the race, the mask, the weight of appearing. Perhaps you, like so many, are looking for a truer way of existing. And that's why I invite you. If this video made sense to you, like it now, because it really helps the channel to continue. And subscribe, because here we talk about what really matters, calmly, deeply, and truthfully. Deeply and